Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good morning everyone. So we are in week 16 and for this week we're doing narrative writing. For my year 7 students this is probably new to you, and for my year 8 students you should probably know about this already. Okay, so before we start, as usual, I want you to grab your pen and your notebook and take notes while you watch this video. So, before we start, I would like to show you the lesson outline for today. So, for the first section of this lesson, I will be introducing you to narrative writing, and for the second section, I will show you the elements of narrative writing. Section 3, how to plan a plot. Section 4 is all about narrative writing tips and tricks, and the last section will be your homework. Right. So, section 1, introduction. So, what exactly is narrative writing? Basically, narrative writing is when you narrate or tell stories, okay? So, in its essence, narrative writing must have a beginning and ending, okay? So, when you tell stories, when you write stories, you should have a storyline, okay? So, there's a beginning, there's the middle part, and ending, okay? There's nothing much more than that. It's just telling stories. Okay. Now, narrative writing is a part of SPE Paper 1 question, so you won't be expecting narrative writing in your Paper 2, only Paper 1. Okay, I want you to take note of that. Okay, let's move on to Section 2, which is elements of a story. Now, in a story, there are some things that you should have. Okay, so for this lesson, I will show you 6 elements. Okay, the first one is setting. Second one is plot. Third, characters. Problem. Climax. And the last one is resolution. Now you should have all of these six elements in your story. Okay, don't worry, I'll be explaining each one of them in the slide. So, setting. Setting is when and where does the story happen. So usually it is best to include this in the introduction. So you tell your readers where is this happening and when this is happening. Okay, is it in the 1960s? Is it the present time? Is it yesterday? Is it last week? And where did this happen? Okay, is it at your home? Is it at school? And etc. Plot is what happens in the story. Okay, so a plot is a series of events that occur in a story. So as I said before, a story should have a plot. So there's the beginning, in the middle, and the ending. If your story is just one point at a time, like you're explaining one situation, then it's not really a story. That's just descriptive writing. Okay. And of course, there should be characters. So, who are the main and supporting characters? And I have to emphasize this. Sometimes we get carried away in writing our stories, so you should not have more than 2 supporting characters. So, if you have 2 supporting characters, altogether you should have 3 characters. Okay, 1 main in one and 2 supporting. Okay, you shouldn't have more than 3 because that will just make your story a bit packed and hard to follow. And remember that you have a word limit to this, so don't write more than you should. Okay. Okay. So problem is what is the main conflict in the story. So in a story, there should be one issue that your main character is pursuing. Okay, so you're trying to solve in the story. Your main character is trying to solve this problem. Okay, climax is the highest and intense point of the story. Now, this is usually where plot twists happen. So you have to add suspense and plot twist inside this, in the climax points of the story. Okay. um, and the last element is the resolution. Now the resolution should have the solution to the problem, okay, a fix. There should be the ending as well, and the morale of the story. What lessons can you give from your story? Okay, so those are the elements. Remember that elements should shape your story. Okay, if you have 6 of these elements in your story, inshallah, your story will be a good one. Okay. Okay, let's move on. Okay, now, so do you remember the story of the hare and the tortoise? I think you do. In Malay, I think we call this um, Kura-Kura dan Arnab. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken. So this story is one of the most popular children's story of all time. It involves a tortoise, Kura-Kura, and a hare, Arnab. Right? So they both raced, and who got to the finishing line first won. Right? So let's analyze the story using the elements so that you understand the elements a little bit better. Okay? So, setting. So the story happened in the forest, if I'm not mistaken. And unfortunately, the time is unknown. But you can, I mean, it's a children's story. You probably don't need a time scope for this story, but in your story you probably need to have a time scope. Okay, and then plot. So the plot was, what happened was that the hare and the tortoise were racing, and the hare was being arrogant. He was confident that he could win, but he fell asleep midway, and eventually the tortoise outran him while he slept, and he won. The tortoise won. So the character, if it isn't obvious, is that the tortoise and the hare. And from what I remember, there are no other supporting characters. Right? The problem in the story is that the tortoise knew that he was slow and that the hare would beat him. So the climax of the story was that the tortoise finally caught up with the hare and found that he was actually sleeping under the tree. And the resolution was that the tortoise, quietly passed the hare, and then he was the one arrived to the finishing line first and eventually won. Okay, as you can see, even a short children's story have elements, and they all fulfill all the elements, so that's why it's a good story. Okay, I hope that's clear. Okay, section 3, planning a story. So how exactly can we effectively plan a story? And actually, there's no fixed way to do this. It all depends on your creativity, and it also a good probably a good probably best for you to plan your story because you need it since you have a time limit. Okay, so planning a story would help you. If you don't plan, you will get caught up in your overthinking, over planning, and probably even overwriting your story. So planning will help. Okay, so there are some ways that can help you start. Now, as you know, a story has the beginning, in the middle, and the ending, but this is a bit boring and mundane, right? I mean, um, it's just a straightforward story. So what you can do is you use this one. This is a great way for you to plan your story. Okay, this is a pyramid. So the first part there is the exposition. So the exposition is where your introduction starts. So your story setting should be included here. Remember setting the time and the location if you have one. Okay, and then the second point there is the rising action. Now, the rising action should include a series of events that lead to the climax. So this is where your story built up. So, yeah, so you should have a series of events that happen towards the climax here, okay? So, and then the climax, this is, as I said before, this is where your story reaches an intense point. So, add your plot twist, add your suspense, add anything that would grab your reader's attention, okay? And then it will go down to the falling action. So this is where your story is starting to settle down from the climax, okay, and almost reaching to an end. And then finally the resolution, and this is the ending to your story, and this is also where morale can be stated. Okay, so for example, in the story of the tortoise and the hare, the moral of the story is that you shouldn't be arrogant and you shouldn't underestimate people who are below you or who have less than you. Okay, that's a moral. All right. Okay, section 4, narrative writing tips and tricks. Now, this section will be a bit longer, but I hope this will help you in writing your narrative, okay? So tip number 1 is show, don't tell. Okay, so this will help you be a little bit more creative. Okay, so this technique is handy when you want to describe something in detail. So for example, let's say you wanted to tell your readers that your main character is feeling anxious. Anxious in Malay is probably, it's the synonym of nervous. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't quite remember the Malay word for this, but the synonym would be nervous. Okay, so instead of simply saying your character was feeling, simply saying he was feeling anxious, what you can do is, instead of showing, okay, just showing, sorry, instead of just telling that your character is anxious, you can say, or you can show by saying, his heart palpitated. He could feel it pounding against his sweaty chest. Everything on his mind was a culmination of dark and twisted thoughts. He couldn't breathe, and he couldn't make his trembling hands to stop. Now, this is pretty amazing, right? It's a detailed and clear image of the situation. So, show, okay? Don't just tell. Don't just say, oh, my character is happy. Show how your character is happy. Show their behavior. Okay? This is actually my favorite way to narrate a story because it helps you, one, to add more words, and two, it's just very, very clear. Okay? It shows very clear how your character is experiencing at that time. Okay? Tip number 2, dialogue expansion. It is normal to use dialogues in narrative writing, and in fact, you should use dialogues, okay? So instead of simply stating what your character is saying, try to expand their behavior or the situation itself. So for example, okay, two housemates, Emily and Anna, are talking about their new home that they have just bought. So let's look at their conversation with and without dialogue expansion. So this is without dialogue expansion, okay? So let me just read it out. So I'm so happy we chose this house. Same. I'm so thrilled that I don't have to take the bus to work anymore. And I don't have to deal with noisy neighbors anymore. Now, the problem with this one, without dialogue expansion, is that you don't know who's talking. Is it Anna? Is it Emily? And you don't know, you cannot imagine what they are experiencing at that time. It's just on the surface. Okay, so with dialogue expansion, it helps you to be more creative, be more clear. Okay, so let me just read this one. I'm so happy we chose this house, Emily said, her eyes wide opened. Anna beamed back at Emily. Same. I'm so thrilled that I don't have to take the bus to work anymore. And Anna twirled in her huge living space, don't have to deal with noisy neighbors anymore. You see, it's just more alive if you have dialogue expansion. Okay, so use dialogue expansion to to create more a visual, clear visual to your story. Okay. Okay, and then tip number 3 is to use figurative language. So figurative language includes metaphors and similes. In Malay, we call this as cakap bunga-bunga. So basically, you're just playing around with your words. Macam kita ni bercakap not straight to the point. You're creating like this macam you guys are creating cakap yang to show what you're saying is a bit more nicer than it already is, or a bit more vivid than it already is. So for example, figurative language, okay, so it can help you make a detailed description. So let's say you wanted to describe a beautiful garden. Now, instead of just saying a beautiful garden, you can say the garden was heaven on earth, adorned by greeneries and a clear lake. So this is metaphor, okay? You're comparing a beautiful garden to a heaven. So it's a clear comparison, okay? Using simile, you can say the garden was as beautiful as heaven, okay? Okay, we're on to the last section, section 5, which is your homework. Okay, I understand that the lesson is just a crash course to narrative writing, meaning it's just a quick course, okay, quick lesson. But I want you to take everything that you learned today to doing your homework. Okay, so for my year 7 students, for your first period, so in your HPL, complete exercise titled personal narrative example. Okay, and then in your second period, I want you to write a story between 150 words to 250 words that include the sentence. Okay, so the sentence is, he stopped and turned, and there it was, the thing that he had been searching for. Okay, so I want you to write that on a foolscap paper. And then for my year 8 student, for your first period in your HPL, I want you to complete an exercise titled How to Write a Story, Show, Don't Tell. And in your second period in your HPL, complete exercise titled Writing Dialogue. So the submission for this will be on the 7th May 2020 on Thursday. Okay, so that's all for today's lesson. I hope you enjoy this. I know narrative writing can be a little bit daunting, but I want you to try your best to be creative, okay? That's why I'm giving you a week to do this, so for you to open up your minds and yeah, and practice, okay? So yeah, that's it for today. I will see you in the next lesson. Goodbye. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.